about the flow of how people might use the various technologies. And so just to recap, just starting off in Mattermost and scheduling a meeting, and then going to CodeEMD or potentially a Kanban environment, because cards are sometimes easier to sort than long text. So it's kind of a branch there. You go either to a Kanban environment or to CodeEMD and collaborate with other people as you're moving stuff around. You'll probably end up using both, which is really messy, but I don't know, I have to figure how that works. And then after the ideas mature, people would take the content from the conversation and persist it into their federated wiki, while other people will actually persist it in different ways. And that's when you end up having more discussions back in either CodeEMD or all the way back into Mattermost, saying, okay, we had this conversation. This is the way I saw it, and I persisted it in my federated wiki page here. And someone says, well, no, I partitioned it a completely different way. I saw the conversation differently. And so now we end up with real conversations about, well, what is on a wiki page, a card, that ends up being persisted, and what ends up, and how's it subdivided. One of the problems I see in federated wiki, and wiki in general, and the way the pattern language has been focused, is pattern language is focused too much on the individual pattern and on a single card, if you get a card deck, whereas it really should be about combinations. And so it could be that that Robert puts it into 2 cards and I put it on 3 cards, and it's kind of like, are these ideas the same or different? And that's a discussion we need to have. We don't need to have. We could actually have them on our federated wikis separately, but the way that we partition and think about knowledge is different.
Cool. I want to show you some of the new things. I'm thinking about a card-based interface using CodeEMD. So we have a few minutes later. I can show you where I'm with the portal here.
As you're pulling that up, Robert, I'm not sure if I can make it to Corvallis or not because of family vacation stuff. I'm going to try and get down at least for a day. But should you want some help actually being ready to say, here's Dig Life, here's Open Learning Commons, I would be all over helping you with that.
Yeah, well, just some extra context there. I haven't really been dragging my feet. I've more so been like trying to decide how big of a thing I want to bite off. So the latest is I'm half considering, rather than flying, sort of like either taking my own car or renting a car and like driving all the way there and meeting all the people that I've been wanting to work with or reconnect with over time. So that's sort of the stage of what I'm at now. And there's a ton of people over on the West Coast that I'd love to sort of meet in person and connect with. And Fernandez and Ashland, and I don't even know all the different places that are over there and how they're all ranged. I'm sort of not great at geography in that sense, but I'm trying to link a bunch of things together. And so, yeah, that's the state I'm at.
That's really a cool idea. And it makes a lot of sense because when you actually get to the West Coast, you actually need a car to get around. But I don't know if you follow Chris Messina. So Chris Messina was active in the OpenID stuff, but he in effect sold everything and moved out of his apartment and is taking a year and couch surfing around the world, which is like, wow, here's a guy that's really doing it on the web, but he's giving talks too. So so the idea of actually visiting people and moving is actually a creative one.
Digital nomad in real life.
Right. All right, shall I show you some things on the portal? Yeah, is that a good time? Good. Let me switch my screen here. So real quick, I want to keep this short here so we can talk about other stuff too. So this is the portal here. I'm entering here into the space that Michael created, right? So from here, you have the different options to go into the different services, right? You can go to the map, the skill sets, you can view the channels that you have. If I click on this, the channels in that space, and the calendar and the other things. So the new thing that I've added to the portal is the cards are now distinguishable by kind of type of card you're creating. So I notice this is a typical node here. I can open this and it opens up the CodeMD, right? So a standard plain node. What I want to do is sort of add more functionality to these nodes. So the card contains sort of more meta information about what is happening with the conversation. One of them obviously is some of the tags that are embedded on CodeMD, so they can surface here, and you can actually click on this, and then it filters the cards. So if I click on card, you see there's only one card with card tag, and it hides everything else. So that's a quick way to filter through a large set of cards here, right, by looking at the tags. The other thing is this card is special because it has a state or status. So you can see there's something happening here with the card. So it says work in progress. So that gives you meta information about sort of the overall state of the content you're developing underneath, right? So if you're going into this document here, you'll see there's some activity in the document, right? Some action steps, some implementation steps, whatever it is, right? And that can be reflected in that state that you assign to the card. That's one thing I wanted to show you. The other thing is, let me switch to operations screen here. So I'm also starting to implement the governance protocol using cards. And for this, I'm thinking about using this what I call generative sequence of a governance protocol or decision-making protocol. Again, using the card-based interface and using the CodeMD document underneath it. And a simple way to do that is actually to reflect again the state, or the stage rather, the stage of the card on the UI itself. So you see a bunch of cards here, right? And they're all titled OPI, so this is the Open Participatory Inquiry. So these are some larger questions that the collective wants to tackle, right? These are all placeholders for now, so these are not actual questions, right? So just looking at this as a sample set. And these could be questions that are in a different stage now, So the first one here is an inquiry where some big decisions is going to happen at some point, and they may be in the call for objection stage. So right now they will be at a state where they understand what happened, some clarity has been defined, and then there's a question of, okay, is a good path? Does anybody has an objection moving forward with this thing, right? This decision, whatever it is. So that's immediately visible on that card here, right? Versus other cards where this is a call for action. So we're beyond that stage and we're saying, okay, how do we implement that thing that we talked about, that we decided on doing, right? So that's this state. Or here's one earlier, in an earlier stage, where you would still think about, okay, give me some more clarity on what this is. Say if the inquiry is about the pricing model of the collective, right? So that would be a larger question that affects a lot of members, right? And affects parts of the strategy of what we're doing here, the model we're creating together. This would be a card that says, okay, here is the current stage is, we'll talk about this pricing model and give you more details on what this is and why we're doing that, right? And then there are other cards here that are more like quick updates, right? So is CAS working? A quick update call, where are we with the third generation of our website? Give us an update on that. And those cards can actually be used. I see this in the context of, say, a steward meeting, a weekly occurring meeting, where you pull up some of these cards and say, okay, where are we with this stuff? Talk about pricing model today, talk about the website today, right? And then as this is a simple CodeMD document, you could open this and then you'd see different sections in the document, right, for the different stages. So here's the call for update, call for clarity, and then this would be sort of a listing of the current activities, a meeting where you refine that, where you talk about it, we raise some more issues, right? So you continuously build on this template, right? And then the thing that's right now in there is just templated text, but it would be specific to the question of, say, where's our third generation website? and then it'll continuously replace the different sections here of where are we calling for updates? Is it a clarity? Is it a stage where we want to look for some feedback and say, do we want to block this? Do we want to have some issues raised? Are we supporting this and so forth, right? So that to me is, I think it's a simple model, simple enough to reuse these cards in a different context, right? In the context of a steward call, in the context of the conversation that is actually happening, say pricing model and the website is in the public engagement channel that we already have. So that would be a right way to provide context and to see actually who's also participating in this decision-making process. Because it's open, right? Anybody can go in here and see these cards. It's participatory. You can go in there and make some edits and or participate in the meetings to move that forward. And it's an inquiry that says, okay, I'm really not comfortable with what's happening in the collective. I can start a new inquiry here, right? And raise that question, and then have some people look at this and give me more feedback on that, give me more detail on what is happening, because it affects more people, right? So this is one of the ideas I have to move these card-based interfaces forward in terms of applying some of these generative sequences. So in this case, it's the governance sequence that helps us to make decisions together, right? I'll stop here. If any questions?
Yeah. Very cool. I would really like to know two things. One, if you can basically like apply this and only have it show up in a certain domain. And this might actually be a way for people, I don't know if it would be actual RSS or something, but if you could subscribe, like it's one thing to join a channel that's public. It's another thing to join a channel that's private. And then it's another thing to agree to be part of the decision-making process for that group. So like, could you actually tag these as relevant to different existing teams? And then if you're on that team, anything tagged with that you get in a feed that's not necessarily domain specific.
Right. So the first part is already done. So if I look at each of these cards here, they are domain specific. So as you can see up here, I'm in the ops domain, right? And they're tagged that way. You see down here, it says this is the type of the card. This is an OPI, so Open Participatory Inquiry, that changes the whole interface of the card. And then it says ops here. So ops is the domain that this card surfaces in. Nowhere else, it's just in ops, right? And if you want to, you can have that cross domain too, right? If you think this is also in DigLive, then you put DigLive in there and it shows up in two domains.
Gotcha,
right?
gotcha.
And then the last piece, the new piece, is the stage tag that says, okay, tell me what stage this card is in. So in this case, call for clarity. So if I go back here, right, so that gives it the indicator of, okay, this is call for clarity. That's the stage we're in right now, right? In the ops domain. So if I go back to DigLive here, you won't see that card here because it had nothing to do with this conversation, right?
And then this is like if Robert were to implement one in Open Learning Commons and say, what is the distinction? When do you post in Open Learning Commons versus DigLive? What is the flow between that? That could be a whole inquiry right there. That was really just in Open Learning Commons. Is that right?
That's cool, right? So if I go to Open, right now there's no card, but as soon as we tag them, right, they show up here. And if they show up in two domains, maybe that's a cross-domain issue that, or a conversation we want to have.
So how do people, like, what is the signaling that people get that a new card has been created in a domain or a decision space that they care about? And then how does this interact with an FAQ? Because inquiries that come up a lot, obviously, there's a natural flow into an FAQ.
Right. I mean, this can be further embedded or integrated. You mentioned RSS feed, for example. You know, I can see that's a possibility to show you the new cards that are coming up, right? Or you can sort it in different ways. like if you go to this Dig Live thing and you want to see, say, cards around CAS, right? So you click on this and then you filter this stuff down to relevant cards on this topic. And I think, important is that you do, just like David mentioned, this flow early on, right? So there's the chat, there's the conversation that's happening in the different channels, right? And it's important that you bring in these cards also into these conversations, right? So here's the fast flowing chat stream, right? And then from there you can embed links to the slower moving stream of these documents that you create, right? I'm even thinking to tag. You could do that, right? You could also tag these cards based on the channel, right? So you could put on this card an AI tag, say, right? And then you could filter it down to, okay, give me the cards relevant for this particular channel I'm in, right? So then you have, I think, very adjacent is then the idea of having the fast-flowing chat here and then having the 4 or 5 cards that you're currently talking about, right? And then moving between these two, I think, is important. And then the next stage, as David mentioned, of course, is, okay, now you have a bunch of cards. They describe a project. They describe something, that you've implemented. Maybe there's a broader context now on a web page, on a wiki, to give it embedded in even more structure. That's important. Also, I want to point here, there's another type of card I'm thinking to create. It's called role. So as soon as we have a new role popping up somewhere, we can actually make that a card and say, okay, and then link that to the status of the card. So this could say open, could mean we need an ambassador, for Dig Live. And there's a couple of tags here that may, again, ping you to say, okay, it's relevant for me, for my skill set. And you can open that and you have the detailed description about what this is here, and then you can reach out to the right people to go into that role, right?
We need a claim role thing that then tags your profile with the roles that you play.
You could do that. That's additional functionality we say is kind of an application process for that role, right? Or I just indicate, I'm thinking even more simple than that. You could just tag it here, say, I like this. And that sends a signal to the team and say, okay, let's have a conversation if you want to be part of that role. Something like that. But as soon as we agree on, okay, there is a card for roles, then we can have all kinds of roles listed in this UI, right? And then begin to sort them, begin to filter them, agree on which role is what, and then do all kinds of things with this, right? And that's something, I didn't expect get into this so early, but I think it's possible, right? To say, okay, different types of roles, different kinds of cards, and different types of these sort of sequences here where we can help certain processes, right? Be that more a game-like process to develop something, or be that more of a decision-making process to move things along. So as soon as we agree on this, that we can use it, then it becomes easy to use it across the different domains, across different teams, and even organizations too, right? So could be cards that are shared among organizations here, right? That promote decisions, promote roles that you want to offer. We had, in the first part of the conversation today, we talked about different roles and how we can advertise or help other organizations out in your role as a, say, web designer or consultant role. Could be put on a card too, and we share that among the organizations between them.
Is there a way to customize Notepad so that a template, I guess they don't have an API yet. We need to think about what that means for Capricorn and other partners, to be able to say, here it is, and here it is easy to use, and this is what you can do, so they don't have to dig and discover it.
Right. I think, so someone like Capricorn, you see that here in Michael's domain, where you start with a few selected cards, right, and a few channels, and then this is it, right? So they mostly stay within their own domain, and then above and beyond that, you begin to see, okay, there are actually other channels I want to explore, other cards that are now suddenly popping up here because they're tagged that way. But that's like exploratory, right? That's kind of the next stage. After you're familiar with your space here, that's all you see. And even from if I go into Mattermost, if me here, you see all these, I see all of the domains here. But as a new user, and let me show you this, how that looks like. If I'm a new user, I log into this. Oh no, I need to know what different password I'm using. Sorry. Oh, the underscore is wrong. That's why. There you go. As a new user here, this could be Copper course, right? They don't see any of the other domains, right? So this is a very plain view on the chat space with maybe, the default set of channels that we create for them, something like announcement, collective chat, and welcome and orientation. That's all they have as their play space, right? So they don't want to get confused with all of the other tiles, with all of the other channels that exist, but just a few that I want to jump in here, become familiar with this environment, come back every day to say, okay, there are new conversations, I can jump into the conversation, and then expand it from there, right? So I think that's a fairly good approach, not to overwhelm the user with too much information there.
Did you happen to see the recording when we talked to Sarah Matouche?
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
That idea of how do we increase the attention available that anybody using our spaces has, rather than just another place for information overwhelm. How do we put that front and center? Because that's the thing everybody wants right now.
I mean, yeah, her presentation had a lot to do with these feedback loops and man-machine, loops that where the machine learns about the behaviors, about the signals that it gets, and then feeds that back into how you work, and then she had this ethics engine at the center, at the core of it. I think what we can do in the collective as a service is use that for bots. So some bots has some rule sets that a lot of this is controlled by us because we want to know what the bot is going to do next. But there's also some learning loop too, right? So that the bot can learn from what you like to see, what you don't like to see. Say notifications. I like her idea of immediately if you switch off a notification, seconds after it appears, obviously you don't want that at that situation. Maybe the bot can learn, and that's something you could embed that in the algorithm there to be aware of that, right? So reduce the signals, right, or increase the signals. So you can have a sort of a side conversation, a meta conversation with that bot about what's the right signaling for you personally, right? So that kind of thing. I think that's all doable.
David, is the example of the portal something that you could see being useful for something like ISSS?
Not sure if he's still there. Probably stepped out.
David, are you there? You're muted if you are. Robert, thoughts in terms of Open Learning Commons?
Well, I wanted to, yeah, I know David brought in the sort of Kanban element, and that's obviously overlapping with some of the card stuff we saw. And I definitely think as different maybe co-learning teams, or however you want, co-learning groups, or however you want to think of it, as they get a little more deliberate and want to maybe start making like sort of requests and promises to each other about sort of what I'll do next week when we meet. Maybe I'll have read this chapter or that chapter, and I think something like that would exist nicely in like a Kanban style. And I wanted to mention, I think some of the role stuff, I think it could, exist independently on cards, but it would be interesting as metadata on cards. Like within this task on this card, I'm playing a facilitator role, or maybe I'm just assigning it to myself, and that then on a card that looks a little bit more like metadata rather than something that's distinct on its own.
Sorry,
I feel /dig coming back.
Yeah, sorry, I was unpacking to leave. So yes, I like the idea. The differentiation I'll make is on working versus polish. And one of the things that came up with Ward's experience with Wiki was that people said, "Does Wiki have to be ugly?" And his response was, yes, Wiki has to be ugly because if it's polished, then people will go, oh, that looks too nice. I'm not going to touch it. And I've really appreciated that in a lot of the stuff I've done. And when you put a lot of polish on it, then it tends to intimidate. And so it's the same sort of thing as when you're facilitating. Sometimes you just want to use Post-it notes, or you want to use a whiteboard as opposed to putting up PowerPoint slides. And so I think that the card metaphor that you're showing on the portal interface makes a lot of sense to people coming in. The question would be, as we get working, what's the best way to do that? And so, because what you're doing is you're actually moving content from one place to the other. But then if I was actually talking about, okay, let's sequence a series of events that need to be done. And so, typical software development stuff, you're going to do this use case before that use case and that sort of stuff. When you're moving that around in a Kanban type environment, you say, okay, well, this one I'm going to put on top, this we'll put on the bottom, and people just start shuffling stuff. And when I think about doing that in CodeEMD, I can do it in CodeEMD and number things 1, 2, 3, 4, but then I'm moving blocks of text around, and after a while, it just gets annoying. So, Christina, does that respond to your question?
Yeah. Sort of on a more basic level, is that kind of functionality something that a group like the ISSS that needs to make decisions together would be likely to use and easily incorporate into their current decision-making process, make it more able to reach a wider sort of participation input? Or is that overwhelming for people?
No, for me, it's an affordance. And the question then comes, like, already we're talking about Mattermost, CodeEMD, and Federated Wiki. There's 3 technologies. And it's like, we keep going on and on. One of the issues with Federated Wiki is that you really can't zoom out from it. And that's why a Kanban environment would be good. Now, in the interface,
that's definitely
just presented. It does that, but it doesn't do it in the way in a working session sort of way. It's more high polish. And so I hate to say that he should make things look worse so that people aren't so intimidated, but you end up with that sort of dilemma. And so, ideally what we want is for people to actually persist stuff on Federated Wiki. That's really, really what we want. But getting there and how we get there is an interesting challenge.
Well, sort of tangential, but to use the word federation or federated again, we were sort of talking about that earlier on in the call before this call started. And even in the Kanban card space, I have in the past had a desire for something looking like federation, where a card can exist in multiple contexts simultaneously, so that it doesn't have one place that it exists under just Dig Life, or like, especially if you're going to put some open call for participation out into a space, that some of those cards might want to exist across all of the headings, and that that I don't know if we already are doing that, or
you can do that with tags already. I think that we need to, once CodeEMD has a API, that we'll need to make that interface, like setting up your card, a lot easier for muggles. But right now you can do it with tags. We don't have any documentation, do we, Joaquin? On how to do that? Just like copy a card that exists and hack at it?
Right. The only feature that you have, Robert, right now is you can take the entire history of cards that you have access to, and then copy that into the portal. There's this one button underneath the notes You see that if you hover over that. That allows you to do that. And that's how I get the tags into the cards, right? So metadata into the cards. But I don't interact yet because the API doesn't exist. But they're working on it, so I'm pretty sure at some point they will have one.
I was just sort of Googling as we were talking, and I don't know if they're of any use, but there are some sort of hidden API endpoints that is in the link that I shared. The other thing, maybe I could screen share and you could walk me through, because I was trying to look at the cards while you were demoing, and yeah, for some reason I see nothing on my portal, regardless of like what context I'm under. If that would be useful.
How about, Robert, why don't you screen share and we'll see if we can fix it.
Yeah. So I think I saw you in ops, and then you just sort of click notes, right? And then I should see cards here somewhere.
So click on that little menu icon on the top left next to notes. Okay, and then you see on top there's a slider there. Turn that on and off. That one, that's right. Turn it on and turn it off. Now come back here. Now click on the notes again. Let me see. That's the second one. You see that there's a secondary level.
This one.
That's for the history.
Ah, okay. So update it.
Yeah, if you do that, you see that's your history there. You can just, it's a little bit awkward because the API doesn't exist. So you have to copy paste, from the bottom box into the top box and then update it.
Okay. Oh, I see.
that's the JSON stuff that gets now added to right. Gets added to the portal that you see.
That's a blocker. We're not going to be able to get like Capricorn's community to do that until we fix it.
No, we don't, right? But only one person needs to do that. So if someone with some kind of an admin right needs to do that, then it's visible to everyone else.
But why isn't it working for Robert now then?
I have to take a look. So yeah, do that update and then do refresh. That is really weird.
Maybe I should do like a hard refresh.
Let me see the console. Let me see if there's any message there. Oh, that's the dot again. I cannot believe this.
Oh, it's my.
What is it?
My username has a dot
in it.
I thought I resolved that a long time ago.
Okay. One thing though, I just noticed the link I shared about the hidden sort of API endpoints. I see they have a history endpoint that requires.
Yeah, that's the one I'm using. I'm using that one.
Oh, so you're getting the history, but you need to copy and paste it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's the history. That's it right there.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that, Robert. I don't know why this came back again, but let me fix that and let you know when it's done. Then you should see all the cars.
Cool.
Did you want to see something in the cards? Because we couldn't fix what we wanted to. So you need Joachim to share again so you can see what you were wanting to see?
Not really. I just I wanted to flag that to maybe I could learn how to resolve it, and it seems we've sort of done that. So, but I've sort of, in terms of facilitating a meeting, I think I've seen it done or proposed in the past that would be super useful as like shared Kanban space as being like a dynamic agenda, and that your purpose through the week would be to sort of maybe through tags, if we do have this sort of multiple overlapping Kanban boards where like one card can exist in multiple, that you might sort of take one card sort of evolves over time in different contexts, but that you might sort of propose for the next meeting to like, okay, I'm moving this card onto like on the agenda or something like that. And that you're using the card Kanban space as like your means of sort of prioritizing what to talk in a meeting or something like that. So I don't know, maybe the portal isn't exactly at this point optimized for sort of that type of card interaction Kanban style, but I think something like, well, I guess I heard David asking for an update maybe from Jim or others, what options we have with CloudDrawn for maybe doing cards in this sort of way with these columns that cards can live in and shift between.
I love the idea of having like I can arrange the cards in a certain way and you can arrange the cards in a certain way. We don't have to look at the same lists, but they might be the same cards.
Hmm.
We want you to do lots of magic.
Robert, this would also be a good case for this talk time thing I've been putting together a while back, right? So, let me real quick share that. So this is talk time where you can now actually add your tool sets to the meeting on the right side here. See these numbers here? So there are like 3 tool sets adjacent to this meeting here called Dig Live, right? And you can use it any name you want here as the URL that you share there. But if I go to the first one, say that could be a CodeMD document, maybe a shared document you develop during the meeting or continue to refine, right? This could be a visual, a shared, visual that you refine during the meeting. Or it could be Kanban board, picture, as long as you can embed the application in this thing, then this is a Kanban thing that is shared and people can actually go in there and move stuff around. Or what I've added here is Jerry's brain here, right? So always good to have Jerry in the meeting, right? So you could use Jerry's brain here and then see if, let's say Jerry had anything researched on Kanban. I'll pull this up here. Kanban tool, here we go. Yeah, he did. So there you go. So you can have Jerry's input during the meeting, right, on what this is and give you more context, right? So it could be all kinds of tools that you use during the meeting, right? And you keep coming back to that. That's important. It's not a one-time thing. It's a thing that you can come back to for the next meeting and refine that.
We were talking about the Kanban Agile difference and different tool sets in the Climb That Mountain channel. And I'm wondering if we want to go ahead and have Kanban.diglife.coop with whatever the Cloud Run. I don't think it was WeCan, it was something else. Jim, do we want to put that up there so we can compare that and Agile? Because I think that some teams will want to use Agile with a little more opinion about Agile methodology, and some would want like a lighter weight tool that's easier for muggles to understand.
Yeah, before we do that, before Jim answers, I mean, Eric is looking at that too. I wanted to have Eric to take a look at the different Kanban tools we have, because there's also stuff in the Agile tool. What's it called again?
Yeah, Taiga.
Taiga.
There's a Kanban view, but I have found it. I use Trello for a lot of things, and I've found Taiga a lot less flexible. And because I don't have any grounding as a software developer, and I don't have any sense of like what the heck is an epic and when am I talking about an epic or a user story or whatever, like a lot of the language in there is just alienating to me. Even though I think that I should be able to use it very easily, and I don't know what the relationship is between a Kanban and an epic story, whatever that other view is called. Is that just different views? Are they like, I don't know. I've found it pretty confusing. Although I was really excited to use it.
Yeah, that's because Taiga is actually designed for software development, and it's actually the only tool that does well in crossing over from a Kanban-based approach to a traditional burn down charts and that sort of thing. But it's way overkill for most people, and so I suggested WeCan, which is a node-based application that had received a lot of development. I'm not sure what's happening with it now. And Jim had suggested one that was PHP-based that I've looked at, but when I looked at it before, I was less impressed than I was with WeCan. So there is an assessment to be done on that.
Jim, what was the benefit? You already came down somewhere.
I think it's easy enough to try them both and get some feedback on it if you want to use one. The main benefit to Kanban was that it supports OAuth. So in principle, we can combine that with our login, with Mattermost login. Although I did experiment with that and I had some trouble making it work. and it has a lot of plugins. It has calendar plugins. It has Gantt chart plugins. It has plugins up to kazoo. It seems to have a very active community. Um, but it may be that Weekend is, lighter weight and easier to use. I think each has its benefits.
Do you know if this mobile requirement is available with Conboard or Weekend? Taiga is not. Robert already determined that.
Well, it is, but you have to pay.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so I think what David suggested is some kind of evaluation here. Put it out there, have a few people evaluate it, and then we can make it as another service offering.
Well, it seems like having Taiga as a service offering, if people want to use that, makes sense because it is, as David was saying, it is the one that goes easily between like Epics and Kanban views. So there might be subsets of people who really do want to use that type of thing. But is either Weekend or Kanban or Conboard going to be a replacement for Trello, where so many people are already?
Since you've already got Taiga running, I don't know if it makes sense to take it down, and that's really a call on your part. But Taiga, as a company, they actually have free Taiga installations for open source projects. And so I've actually signed up and I've done that. And again, the same sort of restriction. If you want it public and it's an open source project, then you can go on Taiga's own website and they do all the maintenance work and then there's no work. So if there's work involved on DigLife's part to maintain Taiga, I would place as a lower priority than a simpler Trello replacement.
I think it. Bye, Michael. I think it is easy, right? Because we're paying for Cloud Run to maintain all our apps.
Yes, it's quite easy. Really, the complex part of Taiga, really, well, like you said, a lot of the terminology used there may not be the best. It is very flexible in that you can change a lot of the terminology in the interface to be more friendly if you want to do that.
On the admin side or for any team?
Well, I guess it would be admin for any team.
So if I changed it for a specific team, it wouldn't affect agile.diglife.coop across the whole thing.
Yeah, now I've used different teams on their public server. I'm not sure how that works in ours. I guess we create different projects. I don't know if we can change the terminology per project. That's something else to look into.
Yeah, that's something to explore, Christina. Because I had used it at one point to define the governance process, and I relabeled basically all of this stuff in there to make that look like cards and label the cards as the same, sequence that we have in today's process. But let's take a look at that. I was hoping, that Agile would become, or slice of Agile would become, one of the protocols that teams can use. It doesn't have to be the entire thing, obviously, but if you can't slice it and you can't see just a small slice of that without getting into all of the other pieces of Taiga, then of course we need a separate tool for that, and just specific to Kanban. And the point about Trello, that's like the Slack conversation, right? At some point, there are going to be some admin features you need, and then you pay for it or not, right? And then you're back into the same square that you were with
right.
when you went to Slack, right?
This is not open source, but apparently they have rejected VC money, so at least they're not trying to exit. And this has come up a few times in a few different spaces for me in the last 2 weeks. So Joachim, especially, I wanted you to make sure that you knew this was there, because it seems like the design of it and the flow between a note space, like just from a design level, is probably interesting to look at, because of the easy flow between taking notes, looking at tasks, doing that sort of thing. The experience of that should be similar to whatever, however we pull it together in the back end. The Dig Life suite should look something like, it's very easy to set this up, and you can cobble your tools together however you want. So I just wanted to flag that interface.
Right. Right. Especially since the concept is so simple, right? You have these columns, you label the columns, and you move stuff between them, and you can assign it to people. That's very basic stuff.
Actually, one thing I wanted to flag that's also like, maybe there isn't a perfect tool we find through evaluation, but one nice thing about Taiga is it's also made for almost like having an open marketplace of projects that people can discover projects and sort of say, hey, I put my hand up, can I help with this project? And there's sort of like an onboarding there. So I think Taiga hosts its own sort of server online that is the Taiga server, and you're able to go there and discover projects and get involved. So maybe this is an interesting way for the Digital Life Collective or otherwise to sort of look at having a project type interface. And then, what I heard Christina saying earlier about sort of how the portal makes like a nice sort of knock on the door layer on top of Mattermost, that we could have that sort of same thing within the project context of what projects are out there, how do we discover them, what are their needs, and that sort of thing.
I was actually wondering if you could, the same way that you're doing with roles and notes, and there's a little bit different UI on the cards, the different types of cards, so it's visually easy to see. Especially in stewards, we need one for like team, so you can easily see this is the team coordination protocol, the team notepad, Does that make sense?
A question for me or for Robert?
For you.
Okay, for me. Okay. Yes. It is. Yeah, let's put it on my to-do list.
Okay.
Give me the link.
Where is your to-do list in Taiga, or where do we put that?
CodeMD.
Oh, okay.
Let me put it right here. It's called my punch list. Maybe I shouldn't share this link.
Too late.
Here it is.
I'm afraid it's too late.
Oh, sorry.
I'm gonna have to drop off on the hour here. But one of the things I was thinking was Christina was asking about again. I was listening to Notepad. If I find how the cards are stored, I can generate an event for that when an event card is created or whatever. The chat bot could send you direct messages according to some filtering. Is one way to address that. I just wanted to say that. So that we should think of the chatbot when we think of things that we want to notify people of.
As long as we are also thinking about the number of notifications they get in general.
Right.
I'm wondering if we could use a little bit of the like 1 to 5 priority of notifications, so that people can say, I only want to see a little bit. Like, you could do a little questionnaire at the beginning as they're being, I don't know how to do that. I really like Sarah's emphasis.
Thinking we can have we tell the chatbot, less or more.
Robert, do you think that there's any need for me to join any FedWiki calls at this point? Or is it still pretty geeky?
I wouldn't say it flows in and out of depths of geekiness, but Ward's really inviting and likes to sort of do networking on